Hi, everybody. It's Catherine Oterial, and normally, as you know, I send a video following a holiday or day where we're off from the Prosperity Group. Um, Today, I'm going to record some ideals work information. A couple of weeks ago, I sent out some ideals material, and I got a lot of questions on it. So I thought that I would make a video rather than send this out in PDF because some of you can't get the PDF because it's an old file. I have a scanner, but I don't have a computer hooked up to it. So um, it would take a little while. So I decided today to record this for you in video. So I'm going to put the phone down in a minute, and what you're going to be listening to is my voice reading a commentary on the Edgar Cayce readings dated April 1992, number 3, volume 1, Directions, Motivations, and Ideals from Kevin Tedeschi. This was reprinted some time ago in Venture Inward. I believe it was 2012 or 2013, but I might be wrong. It's quite some time ago. It was a reprint from 1992. So a lot of people find this material helpful, and I hope you enjoy. There is being laid out plans for a work that, as given, is to change the thought of mankind in general in many directions. Edgar Cayce reading 254-37. Reflections, a commentary on the Edgar Cayce readings, April 1992, November 3rd, Volume 1, Directions, Motivations, and Ideals, Kevin Tedeschi. All of us, at different periods in our lives, struggle with what we should be doing, where we should be going, or how we might fill that special place or niche which God has in mind for us. We often find ourselves searching and aren't always certain what it is we're looking for. Since this state of inner confusion is something we all have in common, you would think that any practical solution that provides insights or addressed an answer to this dilemma would be heralded from the highest mountaintop. Yet perhaps one of the most frequently overlooked principles in the Edgar Cayce readings is this business of working with ideals. And it's very same principle that can provide us with a first step answer every time a personal search finds us in a state of confusion. It's true that most individuals studying the Cayce information quickly become familiar with the word ideals. After all, Cayce himself challenged people to first become aware of their spiritual ideal. During the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, you could hardly attend an ARE program anywhere without hearing ideals discussed at some point. But unfortunately, the ideals exercise chart can all too easily become nothing more than a homework assignment, filling in columns or jotting down notes that are never again wrestled with once on set to paper. The chart can become something we simply file away, pulling out only when we are asked to work with ideals, or wishing we kept it when an ARE speaker announces again, to our usual frustration, sometimes boredom, that it's time to fill in our ideals chart. The reading's approach to ideals, however, is not one in which we're given a one-time assignment to turn in and then can be done with it. Rather, it's one in which we're challenged, encouraged, even prodded to begin a personal masterpiece created by the soul throughout this lifetime and shared with others through one's interaction and relationships, even picking it up and working with it again the next time around. I'd like to look at ideals from this second approach, grappling with what they are, discovering why they're important, and discussing how to work with them. Whether we're lifetime students of the readings or just becoming introduced to the material, Cayce's insights on ideals can provide much assistance in helping us to map out our life journeys. Just what is an ideal? In simple terms, an ideal is motivating influence that undergirds the intentionality of why we do what we do. It's like a North Star that guides us in the dark of night. It allows us to focus upon the direction toward which we may wish to be headed. Whereas a goal is something attainable, in Cayce's terminology, an ideal is really a motivating pattern that guides our lives. It's not something we're going to pick up and cherish like a prized object. Rather, it's more like the rays of the sun that can warm our face when we're pointed towards it. What may be surprising from the reading's perspective, however, is that everyone works with ideals even on an unconscious level. For example, one individual, Mr. 3231, was told that the reason he had so many problems and so much confusion in his own life was because he'd never really established a conscious ideal. He often felt as if he were in a state of confusion simply because the ideal he established, to be sure unconsciously, was that of a wanderer. He was encouraged to make a conscious choice and to begin to work with it because what individuals dwell upon, they become. How often have we heard the reading's frequent quotation, "Mind is the builder," and yet have we really stopped to ask ourselves what we are building during our own bouts with confusion? For those not familiar with the readings, Edgar Cayce often quoted, "Mind is the builder. Spirit is the life, mind is the builder, physical is the result." That's the quote. One way to begin to discover what kind of unconscious ideals we've been constructing in our own lives is to ask ourselves introspective questions like the following. 1. What sort of workplace would any company be if every employee were just like me? 2. What sort of home life would there be if every wife, husband, child were just like me? 3. What sort of neighborhood would this be if every neighbor were just like me? 4. What sort of self-worth would individuals have if every person had my self-esteem? Or 5. What sort of church would my congregation be if every member were just like me? Questions like these aren't meant to discourage us, but instead they can help us realize how powerful unconscious ideals have been in shaping both positively and negatively what we've become. A conscious ideal is one against which we're willing to measure our every thought, word, and deed. For example, if we choose a conscious ideal such as love, it should establish the criterion for our every action. It could also point us in the direction we wish to be headed. Using the 5 questions above in conjunction with an ideal of love, we might ask ourselves: 1. What sort of employee would a loving person be? 2. What kind of home life would a loving person have? 3. What sort of neighbor would a loving person be like? 4. How might a loving person exhibit self-worth and self-esteem? Or 5. What would a loving person be like in a church congregation? By discovering our best guesses as to the qualities of a loving person, or whatever quality we've currently chosen for our ideal, we can move toward becoming that type of person ourselves. So in answer to the question, what is an ideal, the following Cayce reading provides insights from several perspectives. In entering the present experience, this entity, as others, comes to make more manifested the consciousness or awareness of those influences for good and evil in the experience of the soul, and through the application of that set as the ideal grow towards a unison with that ideal. Each individual entity, whether aware of some or not, sets before self an ideal in the material world, in the mental world, in the spiritual world. The spiritual world is in the realm from which all force or power emanates, and through the mind there is built in materiality those things that either make or mar that influence in the experience of the entity in any given activity in the earth. Reading 1011-1. First of all, an ideal is something that we apply consciously or unconsciously in our daily lives. It's something that influences our every act, our every thought, our every emotion, First of all, an ideal is something that we apply consciously or unconsciously in our daily lives. It is something that influences our every act, our every thought, our every emotions. It is a motivating impulse shaping the substance of who we are as well as who we eventually become. As powerful a motivator as ideals are in our lives, unless we become cognizant of them and take the initiative, they remain largely unconscious. We may have ideals and not even know what they are. Finally, our ideals, powerful enough to mold even material reality, are builded in our experiences through the activity of the mind.